Welcome back, Rebel fans. You're listening to another episode of the Rebel Talk presented by the Rebel Walk. I'm Cam Wicker, and as always, I'm here with Zach Moreth. And we're here to talk a little bit of Ole Miss sports, really in the past week or so. Just talk a little bit about basketball to get us started, and then we'll talk about baseball. Happened today, Media Day at Swayze today. We were up in the Diamond Club with a lot of other media members and a couple of the baseball players and Coach Mike Bianco. Talked to a lot of those guys just about what this season's going to look like, kind of gave us a preview of the weekend, heading into playing 3 elite teams this weekend, Zach, and then obviously gave us the starting lineup and starting rotation for the weekend, and we'll get more into that later into the podcast. But first thing we want to hop into is women's basketball. Just last night, Coach O and Team 50 knocked off number 8 Kentucky, second top 10 win of Coach O's career at Ole Miss, second ranked win of the year. Other one was against Vandy. Maddie Scott and Kennedy Ty Williams had a really good game last night. Kennedy Ty Williams kind of shaky in the first half, really wasn't shooting well. I think she had 1 point until the third quarter where she scored 7 points down the stretch to give Ole Miss the lead. I think she finished with like 8 and 9 and five assists as well. Maddie Scott had 22 and 6 rebounds, and they had a really good tandem there at the end of the game between those two. Really good defensive battle in that game. They got another game coming up this week against Arkansas on Thursday. That should be one they pretty much should write themselves off as the winner in that one, but you know how SEC basketball is these days in this season. The next 3 out of the 5 for Ole Miss to end the season, though, is teams ranked ahead of them in the net, which is going to be pretty tough down the stretch here this end of the season. But I think really to get that win over Kentucky, that's what you really needed to propel yourself to really keep yourself in shots a chance to host in that second round of the playoffs.
Especially, after that loss to Oklahoma, Cam, because we've been talking – it's been a talking point for probably the past 3 weeks since we've been doing this podcast that Ole Miss hasn't really gotten that signature win this year. And we all kind of felt that it was going to come against Oklahoma. And quite honestly, that game wasn't necessarily close down the stretch. So to bounce back and take down a top 10 Kentucky team was electric. And like Cam said, there's still the hope of potentially hosting, a game in March. And that should continue to be the goal for this team. But the veteran presence has to continue to dominate between Maddie Scott and the rest of the ladies who are, doing an incredible job. But, look at the box score, you look at the stats. Maddie Scott is the only player to put up 20-plus points. She has to continue to rise up and be a leader. It hasn't been there for the full season, but when you're playing top 10 teams and games are getting close and competitive, she's got to be the girl that you look after. But this was a nice win, and it shows the team and the fan base like, hey, man, they can win these types of games. They haven't all season long, and finally they did. So like Cam said, next game up against Arkansas, you got to go there and take care of business and then prepare yourself to go to Knoxville, which is never fun in any sport. But this was a good win. So exciting for the women's team. There's no doubt.
Absolutely. And Team 50, like I said, will play again on Thursday against Arkansas at 6:30 p.m. That'll be on SEC Network. Like Zach said, Maddie Scott has to be that person for Team 50 to be successful. Coach O said it in previous press conferences. They need her to make big shots for them, and they're going to need her to make big shots down the stretch against teams like Tennessee. You play South Carolina later in February in the last game of the season against LSU in Baton Rouge. And speaking of that game against South Carolina, that'll be in the Pavilion late in February. I think it's on the 27th. If you guys can get out to that one and support Team 50, they're going to need it. South Carolina, as you know, is one of the best teams in the country. They are every year. And we saw how close Ole Miss made it a game of that against Texas. Texas beat South Carolina a couple of days ago. So Ole Miss is capable of beating South Carolina when they come here later in February. And if they have a crowd to support them, that'll obviously help a lot there. Moving into men's basketball, we have the 19th ranked team in the country in Ole Miss, 23 in the coaching polls, 22nd in the net. Really a hot team right now. Really in the past week, you've seen a different effort out of this team. I say really on the rebounding side of things, obviously Ole Miss continues to get out rebounding. You don't like to see that every game. It kind of gets tiresome if you're a fan. If you're someone covering the games, it's tiresome seeing them get out rebounded. But then you look around and you see the effort they're putting out there, the effort that they're trying to build these past 3 games, specifically in the LSU game and in the win over Kentucky. Everyone seemed to be on the boards, crashing the boards. It seemed you had 4 guys crashing the boards sometimes. I believe they had a handful of offensive rebounds in that game against LSU. And out-rebounded LSU down the stretch really to kind of take over that game with that 13-0 run to end it before the Dre Davis tip-in. And then obviously Dre Davis and Sean Padula have really turned it on here of late, especially Dre Davis in SEC play. Obviously Sean Padula has been the guy that you thought he was going to be, and he's kind of given you more than that obviously this year. But Dre Davis has really stepped up for this team, Zach, and I like what I'm seeing out of this team right now.
Look, man, Dre Davis I give a hand up. I don't want to say hating. That's not the right word, but criticizing, I think is probably the right term for the entire year because this is a guy who played in the Big East, which was arguably the best basketball conference last year. Look at what UConn did in the March Madness tournament. They absolutely smoked everyone, won the title again. And Trey Davis played well in competitive games in the Big East. He scored double digits almost every game. I think he may have averaged somewhere between 12 to 15 points, and we haven't seen that all year. Now Trey Davis starts to turn it on a little bit. He's a mid-range killer in there, Cam. I mean, this dude looks electric. You get him the ball when you need a bucket, and this is another guy who's looks like he can make that shot. So now you have a guy in Juju Murray who can make a crazy sort of shot in crunch time. We've seen Sean Padula do it. We've seen Matt Morrell do it in the past. You look at the Mississippi State game when he hit the dagger there to force that game in overtime. And now it looks like Trey Davis can do the same thing just like he did against LSU. And look, I'll be honest with you, Cam. I was in the square. Now, I'm not going to say the name. I don't want to out myself in the place that I was at, but it was very packed. And I stopped watching the game with about 5 minutes left. Ole Miss is down 12 points. They looked flat the entire game. Looked like LSU was buzzing. The stadium was loud. People were into it. And then all of a sudden, people start gathering around the TV, and I'm like, uh-oh. Oh, here we go. Look at this. We're right back in the game. Jamin Brakefield hits that three-pointer, and then boom, we get the ball back with about 20 seconds left. Chris Beard calls that timeout. Trey Davis hits the game winner, and the place is exploding, dude. It was awesome to see. And I made a tweet that you had to escape. If you're Ole Miss basketball, all you had to do was escape Baton Rouge with a win. It didn't matter how. You could tell from the start it was going to be a sloppy and a really gritty game. And it was through and through. And I think you need to take that same approach into Columbia, South Carolina. You look at South Carolina, you look at their record. It's not great, but they are very competitive with good teams at home. In fact, they almost beat Florida at home, a team who just beat Auburn. So this is the mindset you got to take, man. You got to go in there and you got to find a way to get a win by any means, Cam.
Any means possible. And to your point about just guys stepping up, even Jamin Brakefield makes big shots as of late.
Yeah.
I mean, hitting that three to tie the game against LSU. I mean, he's going up for the tip in layup, but then he realizes he's there too early and he gives up on it and allows Trey Davis to go get it. So that's heads up play from Jamin Brakefield there. It's been great to see this team coming along throughout the year. Like Zach said, they'll play again in South Carolina tomorrow night at 6 p.m. on SEC Network. That should be a tough one. They have a pretty physical front court in South Carolina, pretty big front court. Ole Miss usually doesn't do well against the really big guys inside. We've seen what Amari Williams was able to do, even though Kentucky lost that game. He had a triple-double for Kentucky. Usually the bigger guys have success against this Ole Miss defense. That's pretty scrappy. This Ole Miss defense is a pretty scrappy defense. They create a lot of turnovers. But we'll have to see how that one turns out. They're going to have to go into this one with a chip on their shoulder and not think that the South Carolina team is just going to roll over and let them get the win. Because next week, if you drop this one next week, is a must-win against Mississippi State here in the Pavilion. And I really think it's a must-win anyway because you already dropped the first one to them in Starkville, and you got to really split with your rival to have that I guess fulfilling feeling if you're Ole Miss. Splitting with Mississippi State would do that for you. But that's really all we got for college basketball. That's gonna go on as the season goes on. We're going to talk more about that in the podcast as the season really unfolds here at the end. I think really 5 games left for the women's, 7 for the men's, I think. So not too much longer before the end of the season before we're in March Madness for college basketball. Looks like both teams are going to be in it this year for Ole Miss. Women pretty much have their spot locked up with that net ranking, and men's, barring a collapse, you're pretty much in the tournament right now with a couple of big wins to your name and more to add to your resume if you can get those wins down the stretch. But that's all we got for college basketball. Moving into baseball, we talked to Coach Bianco today at Media Day. We talked to the players at Media Day today. We talked to Will Furness, Luke Hill, Campbell Smithwick, Hunter Elliott, and Riley Maddox. Coach Bianco let us know the lineup. Coach Bianco let us know the rotation. What are your thoughts, Zach, on what this team needs to do to be successful this weekend?
Yeah. It's a tough question, Cam, because these are some damn good teams and really good programs. They're all ranked in the top 25, like we were talking about before we started recording. So you can do one of two things, Cam. You can go and show that Ole Miss baseball is continuing their trend down and isn't prepared to play the top 25 teams yet, or you can go make a statement, go win 2, maybe 3 games, or maybe win one game, but play really competitive in the other two. And that's the direction I'm hoping this team takes. And Luke Hill said kind of the same thing. I believe we'll get those videos maybe posted on our YouTube if you guys want to check it out. But Luke was like, hey, man, we have – if we go to Arlington and make a statement, none of the preseason chatter about Ole Miss baseball and the program being down matters anymore because you've proven to the world that you can compete with those top 25 teams. And that's the big thing. And it starts on the mound. You have 3 veteran guys who all have a College World Series ring on their finger. They got to go out there and show why they are starting and why they've earned these roles. And I think they're going to do that. I think you're going to see a lot of improvements from Hunter Elliott, which it might take some time, but especially Riley Maddox and Mason Nichols, who've had that full time to work and develop with Joel Mangrum, who haven't had any setbacks in the past couple of years. I think they're going to continue to rise up to the occasion. And then offensively, this seems to be the big question mark for me is who are these top tier hitters and how much of an impact are they going to make? And then I was talking about it on another show, but what does the bottom of the order look like? Ryan Moorman, the kid from Illinois, he strikes out a lot, but he hits a lot of home runs. So does he generate run production at the bottom of the order? Because we haven't seen that from these Ole Miss teams in the past. So you're going to get a lot of these questions answered in the first 3 games, but it's going to be very difficult. And unfortunately, I don't have the best knowledge on these teams, but Cam does, and he's going to fill you guys in on why these are some scary opponents, and it's going to be interesting to see how Ole Miss competes against them this weekend.
Absolutely. And before I hop into that, just go over really quick positional lineup right now. Coach Bianco gave us that today at Media Day. Campbell Smithwick probably starting to catch her in that first game for Ole Miss, but obviously going to see Austin Foley, probably Colin Reuter too in that rotation at some point throughout the weekend. Will Furnace at first base, returning to the team from last year. Braden Randall returning to the team from last year as well at second base. Luke Hill and Judd Udemore are going to play both third base at some point. Probably going to be Luke Hill starting in game 1. I would assume Luke Hill moves over to second base when Udemore moves into third. And then Owen Pano, the really highly touted freshman from New York, who's – I mean, if you see him in person, he passes the eye test. He's got a lot of power.
He's a 6'3", 220, Cam.
6'3", 225. He's a big guy. He's a pretty big guy for a freshman.
That's a wide receiver right there, man. Wide
receiver, running back. I mean, you got Chicago Mills Knight coming in for Ole Miss this offseason, who's the same size as Owen Pano. So if Owen Pano, you want to come play running back for Ole Miss next year,
I'm sure need it.
To have you.
Might need him, dude.
No doubt. But Owen Pano, one of the top ranked players in the country. I believe he's 8th ranked freshman in D1 baseball. Coach Bianco and every player today were saying that he plays just with a slow heartbeat. He doesn't really let the game speed up on him, which is really what you want to see out of freshmen. So really excited to watch him play, really out of everyone. But really excited to see this outfield, Mitchell Sanford, Isaac Humphrey, and Ryan Moorman. That's going to be really key right there for Ole Miss, rebuilding that entire outfield from last year that you lost. And you're getting all guys that have experience in the outfield, all guys that can run, that Coach Bianco explained at Media Day today. And then Mitchell Sanford and Humphreys were both top 40 outfielders on D1 baseball. And I think Mitchell Sanford could be one of the best hitters on the team. Isaac Humphrey, as if you watched him over the years at Louisville, he really is a pro hitter, and he's going to show that in the weeks to come. And then obviously Hayden Federico and Luke Chang were the other notables that Coach Bianco mentioned today that could be getting some playing time throughout the weekend in Arlington. But it's gonna be a lot of mixing up and a lot of putting people in places throughout the weekend. Obviously, that lineup will probably be similar to what Coach Bianco gave us. But baseball has a lot of uncertainties. I believe I tweeted out earlier. You never know what's gonna happen throughout baseball. It's a very weird sport. So who knows who could be starting for Ole Miss later in the season? But I have a feeling that this will be the everyday lineup for Ole Miss moving forward. And then the rotation: Hunter Elliott, Riley Maddox, and Mason Nichols. Pretty strong rotation brought back. I believe Bianco said that's most he's brought back since bringing back Nikaisley and Hoagland that 1 year, a couple years back. So pretty good experience right now for this Ole Miss team when it comes to the arms. You're bringing in Joel Mangrum to help them out too. Really excited to see what this bullpen is going to look like for Ole Miss. You got Braden Jones, Sam Takoy, and Mason Morris, guys like that who were on the team last year, who are entering year 2, year 3, some of them on this team. And then Connor Spencer, who was good in the back half of the bullpen last year. Coach Bianco said today it was kind of unfair for a closer to be on a losing team last year and you not really really be able to see his full potential. But everyone knows that Connor Spencer can sling it and really get people out when he needs to and be a big impact for Ole Miss in that back half of the bullpen. With that being said, Ole Miss is going to play some really tough teams this weekend. First game against Arizona, that's going to be on February 14th. On Valentine's Day to open the Shriners Children's College Showdown in Arlington, Texas. That'll be in the Texas Ranger Stadium. Ole Miss played there a couple years back. I don't know if you guys remember that. Hunter Elliott, I believe, pitched in one of those games. Derek Diamond had a crazy showing as a freshman in one of those games as well. So they have experience in that stadium, and they have experience winning in that stadium as well. But first game against Arizona to open the weekend, they're bringing back Mason White. He had 302 last year with 19 home runs. And then Brendan Summerhill, who's I believe is probably a first-round pick. Don't shoot me on that. But as of right now, Brendan Summerhill is probably a first-round pick in the Major League Baseball draft. He hit 324 last year for Arizona, 32 extra base hits and 53 RBIs. And they have a kind of shaky rotation right now. They didn't bring back a lot last year in Arizona, not that I could really see from their stats, but they have 2 transfers they brought in that will be in the rotation. And then I believe Jack Berg will probably start on Friday against Ole Miss. He's a JUCO transfer. He had a .79 ERA in 2 years at JUCO. So that guy doesn't allow runs. Obviously, this is not JUCO baseball anymore, but Jack Berg will probably be the guy starting for Arizona on Friday. And then Casey Hintz could be a guy that starts for him if Jack Berg doesn't. But if it's not one of those 2 guys, it'll probably be a name that I'm not familiar with. But then Tony Pluta is their key bullpen guy, and he's looking at their stats last year, he really was the only effective guy in the bullpen. They went to him most of the time last year during the middle of the innings. He eats up a lot of the middle of the innings, and that'll be probably the guy that Ole Miss sees right out of the gate on Friday if they make it a close game in the middle innings.
Real quick, shout out to Casey Hintz and Tony Pluta. They went to my rival high school, and we're on the same team. So imagine going to play St. Viator High School and facing Casey Hintz and Tony Pluta in the same day. Not fun. But hopefully the Rebs can make it a little better than my high school did. Absolutely.
Obviously, Ole Miss will face Texas on Saturday. Really, I believe that's a really good matchup kicking off the year against an SEC opponent. Obviously not going to be a conference game or count towards the conference schedule, but you're starting off the weekend, game 2, you're playing a conference opponent. I don't believe Ole Miss plays Texas. Do they play Texas in the regular season this year, Zach? Do you know?
I think we play OU.
I think they play OU. I believe they played OU in baseball and football, so they don't really play both, I don't think, in those sports. So I think it's just OU and baseball for Ole Miss in the SEC play this year, but they get to play Texas in this game. So you're seeing where you match up against SEC opponents. And Texas, they're bringing back a lot of talent from that team a year ago. Obviously, Jim Schlossnagle came over from Texas A&M.
That was real
I'm just going to leave it.
That was like one of the craziest things I've ever seen in my life. Just want to say
Absolutely.
That before we get into it. I mean, how do you do that? Whatever. I'm not Jim. I'm not here to judge, but
absolutely. Jim Schlossnagle comes over from A&M. Just going to leave it at that. A&M's the number 1 ranked team in the country to start the year still. Grayson Saunier came over from that Ole Miss team from last year. He'll be on that Texas team. We might see him this weekend, depending on who all pitches in that first game for Texas. But it looks like Texas is probably going to run out one of their transfers, which is Cade Bing or Dylan Valances. That'll probably be one of the guys they have on Saturday, if not Luke Harrison, if Luke Harrison doesn't start on Friday. But they do have Jared Spencer slotted in at Friday as well. Who I believe was another transfer they brought in from a year ago. They have Ace Whitehead in the bullpen. He pitched 10 games last year, but I guess they moved him to the bullpen after getting those transfers in, starting rotation. And they have about 6 or 7 guys from that team a year ago that pitched a lot of bullpen innings and a lot of midweek games that they're bringing back to that rotation. Texas has always been a really elite program, and I think they'll continue to be one this year, and it's going to be a tough matchup in game 2. They have Kimball Schuessler, Jalen Flores, and Max Ballou, all 300-plus hitters last year. They had a combined 46 home runs. That's a lot of home runs out of 3 guys last year. And I think over 140 RBIs too. Yeah, over 140 RBIs for the 3 of them combined too. Max Ballou's a top MLB prospect coming up in the next year's draft. I believe he had second-team All-SEC honors for that team. And going back to that, Hunter Elliott got second-team honors as well for Ole Miss. heading into the season. Would like to see him get back to where he was when he was in that freshman form a couple of years ago. But Max Ballou earned all SEC honors for Texas, and that'll be the three guys to watch in their lineup. Will probably be 1, 2, 3, if not 2, 3, 4 in their lineup on Saturday, and that'll be really a key game in my opinion. If you drop the game to Arizona on Friday, if you can bounce back and get the win against Texas, I think you leave Arlington satisfied. I think that's
agree,
pretty
man.
satisfactory right there.
And I said it before, but even going 1-2, but playing these games close isn't a bad thing. But I think the worst thing that could happen is going 1-2 and having two really bad losses, or obviously 0-3 would not be good as well. But Riley Maddox, man, if you want a guy to face a team that hits a lot of home runs, this is probably the guy. He did it all of last year. He throws a very effective cutter, slider mix, which forces a lot of hitters to just dig the ball into the ground. So if this Ole Miss defense can come to life, make some plays, and try and scrap a few runs across the offense, there's no reason why Ole Miss isn't in this game and have themselves in a position to maybe even win.
Absolutely. And like I said, if you can win, if you drop that game to Arizona and you can win against Texas, that's pretty satisfactory. Moving into Clemson, when I looked at their roster, I couldn't find a lot of returning players from a year ago, but Clemson seems to be one of those teams that are always in the top 15, always on the push to get into Omaha. But it seems like they didn't bring back a lot of guys that I can put up here for y'all to kind of, I guess, give y'all a better understanding of what this team is. But Cam Cannarella is top MLB draft prospect for Clemson. He hit 337 last year. Great name. Cam Cannarella. Great name. Hit 337 last year for Clemson and 11 home runs, 60 RBIs. He'll be their key, probably leading off for them. I believe he's a speedster that plays shortstop for Clemson. And then Ethan Darden and Aiden Canuck will probably be one of the guys that Ole Miss faces. They both returned from the team last year. I think Aiden Canuck might be their Friday guy, so probably Ethan Darden in the back half of that rotation for Clemson will probably be one of the names you see when Ole Miss plays Clemson on Sunday. That's obviously a long way to go. You have to face Arizona. You have to face Clemson. You have to face Texas before that as well. But in my opinion, like I said, Zach, if you can walk away with one win this weekend, it's very satisfactory. But in your opinion, what is a successful weekend for Ole Miss look like?
I think you have to – I don't want to say find an identity, but you got to learn some things about this team because at the end of the day, Coach has said it. He said it a lot today. It's a combination of – yeah, there's some young freshman talent. There's a whole lot of transfers and veterans who aren't ready to take the next step to the MLB. So what do those transfers look like against top 25 Southern programs, I'll call them, because they're not all in the SEC, but they're still really good. And how do the freshmen respond with all the pressure on them? And what type of improvements have these veterans made, especially the pitchers with a new pitching coach? And, you know, the final thing I'll say here is – what offensive player is going to come ready to go? Because if you look at years past, there's usually a marquee guy on the roster who you can look at and say, you know, he's going to be ready to go. He's going to be hitting 2 or 3 all year round. And maybe it's Isaac Humphrey. Maybe it's Luke Hill. Maybe it's Mitch Sanford. Maybe it's Campbell Smithwig, who comes with an attitude to the baseball field after a not so great freshman year. These are all questions that are going to get answered. But you'd like to see them answered sooner rather than later. And you want to see guys come out and establish themselves for the entire season, man. We're going to look back at these games and realize that a lot will change by the time May comes around, clearly. But, you want to find out who's ready to go, who are going to be your guys, and especially offensively, because I do believe pitching is by far the strong suit of this team.
Absolutely. I think pitching is what you can lean your hats on this year. Obviously, you couldn't say that in really the recent past years for Ole Miss. Even that championship year, I mean, you could hang your hat on Dylan Lucia and Hunter Elliott, but really after that, you didn't really have much. This year, I believe you have 3 really good starters in that rotation. Maybe at some point, if Maddox is feeling a little bit better and you think you could throw Maddox in that Friday role, I think sandwiching the lefty in between the righties would benefit Ole Miss in some ways, but obviously a lot of analytics go into that as well. And with Joel Mangrum being in the building, analytics seems to be the the new thing for Mike Bianco that he's never really had in the building, and now he's bringing that in from Major League, bringing that in from the minor leagues, where Joel Mangum did that at a really elite level. That a lot of people say, a lot of the players are saying that he's bringing that same mentality into the locker room, into the bullpen there with them. It seems to be that Lafferty and Mike Bianco has been able to work more with the catchers, which has been very beneficial for Campbell Smithwick, who's, if you asked a year ago when the season ended, you really didn't think Campbell Smithwick was going to be a catcher on this team anymore. Now he's the starting catcher again in Game 1 coming up Friday. But if he's not the guy coming forward, you have two guys behind him, which you didn't have last year. Obviously, you had Eli Birch, but he was another true freshman. So you didn't have another guy behind Smithwick that you could lean on to get behind the dish. And now you got three who you could really lean on. And I know Foley probably didn't catch a lot of games at Kentucky as a freshman, as a redshirt freshman there. But he has experience behind the plate. He has experience behind the plate with these pitchers throughout the fall and the spring. And I believe the strong suit of this team is going to be within the infield. If you're going to be able to play defense this year, you got to have a strong infield. And that's what this team was really trying to build towards in the offseason, going to get Luke Chang. You pick up Owen Pano in the high school recruiting class, and you put both of them out there. Braden Randall comes back, Luke Hill comes back, and this team hasn't played good defense over the past couple of years. Last year, I believe they were the worst team in the SEC by far, I think, in fielding percentage, and committed the most errors in the SEC a year ago as well. So if you can find some defensive identity this weekend and prove that you got better in that area, I believe the hitting will come along. I think the hitting over the years for Ole Miss has came along. Someone usually emerges. Obviously, Luke Hill was kind of that guy last year in SEC play, batted like 321 in SEC play down the stretch after a pretty rocky non-conference play to start the season. And then Isaac Humphrey, who, like I mentioned earlier, pro hitter coming from Louisville. I think he could be one of those guys that emerges for this team. Obviously doesn't have a lot of experience here in Oxford, but he's an experienced player who can emerge as a leader and as a key piece of that lineup for Ole Miss this year.
100%, Kim. And the last thing I want to touch on is, we've been talking about the pitching staff. I actually kind of respect what Mike Bianco said today. He was like, look, he basically said, I'm not even going to go near the pitchers. This is the Joel Mangum show. I'm keeping my hands off. I'm keeping my thoughts to myself. And in one way, it's like, okay, so if the pitching comes out and we're terrible again, you can't really say that much about Bianco because ultimately this is the Joel Mangum show, like I mentioned. But if it's great, this is just more fuel for fans to, be concerned why we didn't have a pitching coach for all these years, but at the same time be excited that we finally have one and have been able to go over that hump and make the adjustment, an adaptation to the game of baseball, which is very technologically advanced. And a huge shout out to the Ole Miss athletic staff for figuring out the situation. Let's hope it pays off in a big way. And it starts this weekend with a couple of top 25 defeats down in Arlington, Texas.
Absolutely. And really big weekend for just Ole Miss sports in general. Like I said earlier, Ole Miss baseball and Ole Miss basketball will play Mississippi State this coming up weekend. That'll be a big one in the Pavilion if you can make it out to that one. But obviously these games will be on TV. I believe they're on Flow Sports. I think that's right, Zach. Good luck finding that if you don't already know what that is. I believe you have to pay for the subscription if you want to watch it. There's a monthly and an annual subscription if you want to watch the boys play this weekend in Arlington. But if you want to just go watch something for free, if you're a student at Ole Miss, go pack the Pavilion. Probably be like 10,500 people there. Should be one to remember, especially if Ole Miss can come out with the win in that one. But I believe that's all we got for you guys. Is that all you got, Zach?
That's all I got, man. Let's hope for a good weekend, all right?
Hope for a good weekend. I believe that's all we got for you guys. Ole Miss baseball, like we said, playing on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday against Arizona, Texas, and Clemson. And then basketball on Saturday and against Mississippi State in the Pavilion. So I think that's all we got for you guys. We'll be here with more updates and in the next podcast and talking probably a little basketball, talk a little bit more baseball as the season goes on. Make sure to tune in to therebelwalk.com for all your Ole Miss sports needs.